What would you do if you found yourself suddenly targeted by the alien abduction phenomenon and the UFO phenomenon, and understanding that not only are these things real and true, but they have an overlap with the demonic? That's exactly where our guest this week finds himself before he has a dramatic and incredible encounter with Jesus on this week's Spirit Answers podcast. Well, today I'm honored to have on the podcast with us Jason Dezember. He's the co-author of the book Piercing the Cosmic Veil, You Shall Not Be Afraid of the Terror by Night, and also a part of CE4 Research Group with Joseph Jordan. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. So an absolutely incredible testimony you have, and it crosses several boundaries, alien abduction phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon. But before we get into all of that, I want to ask you, how did this all get started for you?
Good question. So I think it got started when I was born into a messy marriage. My mother and father were drug addicted, and got a pretty mean divorce when I was 4. And like many people, it was in the 70s, just kind of started getting bounced back and forth through the divorce. And by the grace of God, my grandparents at the time, when I was young, ended up wanting to bring some stability in my life. So they ended up funding me to go to a Christian school from kindergarten to 4th grade. It was called Maranatha Christian Academy. And that's where I asked Jesus Christ to be my Lord and Savior. I was like 9 or 10 years old. And things were going pretty well. I was living with my mother for the majority of the time. A guy ended up, we would go to church a lot. So we would go Wednesdays and Sundays. My mom was working. We were living in Santa Ana in a 1-bedroom apartment. And one night, I guess about 10 o'clock, I had gone to bed. I think it was 9 or 10 at the time. A guy from church knocked on her door that she had met a few times and said, "Hey, Anita, my car broke down. I need to use your phone." And she let him in, and he ended up raping her at gunpoint with me in the house. Yeah, it was rough when waking up at that young in the morning and having all these guys from church standing over your head, and you're wondering where your mom is. But that was a turning point, I think, in my life. I think that's where the anger and the bitterness came in, and she really fell apart after all of that. She started using pharmaceuticals, obviously, and to get help, and she kind of lost her connection with Christ. Some other things that happened to some of my other family members that were really horrible during that same time. And I think in retrospect, the enemy was really working on my family, on me, and I was starting to be angry. I remember at the time I was filled with bitterness and resentment. My parents were bouncing me back and forth. My mother was telling me what a monster my father was. My father was telling me what a weird Jesus freak my mother was. And, I think I went to 3 or 4 elementary schools after I left Calvary. And then I went to a couple junior highs, 3 junior highs, I think. And then ended up living with my father through high school and stayed in the same high school. So all that to say, when I left high school, my dad and I did not have a good relationship, a pretty rocky relationship, and I was really fearful of him. And he didn't know how to raise a child. He just didn't have that in him. I left. I was offered a scholarship to Boston College of Music at the time, and I because of anger and because of resentment, I was already in a band at the time and had a girlfriend. I just decided to not take that path, and I ended up moving out and really playing and touring in some bands for 5 or 6 years, kind of nomad style, and writing a lot of songs, performing a lot of anger, a lot of good times. But in retrospect, a lot of it was driven through despair, heartache, unforgiveness, abandonment issues that I had had. So then I ended up getting married, had my first child, ended up getting divorced from her and cheating on her. when my child was 4 years old, and ended up remarrying the woman that I had cheated with and having two more children, and ended up trying to build a family with no rock in my life. I was trying to please this woman financially, buying her a house and giving her the things that she wanted, thinking that I would find happiness in making her happy. And that ended up backfiring on me. All of this time dabbling and using drugs and alcohol through the whole time since leaving my house in high school. And through the second divorce, I think the crash, I bought a house, and I had gotten some assets, and I was miserable inside. I hadn't dealt with a lot of things with my mother and father. I was just focused on pleasing this woman financially and giving her the things that she needed to make her happy, which it was all in vain. Nothing would make this woman happy. So it was just exhausting. And we ended up, after I think 9 years, and when the crash happened in 2008, I lost my job in the mortgage industry. I lost my house, and I lost everything. She ended up wanting to continue the lifestyle that I provided for her. So she ended up leaving me shortly after. Had a couple different relationships. I lived alone for a few years while she was out dabbling around trying to find someone who could give her the monetary assets that I provided for her. And I guess that's where it all started. I ended up alone. She decided to take the kids up to San Francisco. I guess one of the guys that she was seeing was from high school, and ended up wanting to marry him and be with him. The kids were, I think, 4 and 5. And it devastated me. It was, I love my children. I have 3 children, 15 and a half, 16, and 24. My 24-year-old's down here, and the 2 little ones are up in San Francisco area. But when she took the kids, it was unbelievable. I had never felt so much sadness. Just the process in which that happened, and meeting the guy she was with and going through that whole thing. It was absolutely heart-wrenching, to say the least. It was probably the worst time of my life. So as I'm trying to pull this together, I'm dabbling more and more into drugs and alcohol. I end up renting a room out by myself in Westminster, California, over here. And I rented out a little office space with 2 of these elderly ladies. They were really nice. They knew what I was going through. They were really kind to me. I had this little tiny room, and I was still holding down a job, but I was using a lot. And in retrospect, I had been using for quite some time to numb the pain of what was going on through those years. And during that time in the room, I just remember having this overwhelming sense of unforgiveness towards everyone, and anger and bitterness. And it just was, and my family that I did have in contact with didn't find out where I was. I didn't reach out to them. I was kind of isolated. I was very isolated for that time. It was about 1.5 years. And the isolation will get to you. Things were getting really weird. Things were really, really getting weird. And I was hanging out with different women and different people that I shouldn't have been hanging out with. I had no urge to be with anybody intimately, just because of the pain and the heartache that I had. However, I was so lonely that I would hang out with different women just to pass the time, not getting involved with them, but just whoever I could spend some time with, because it was getting, I think suicidal was probably the best word at that time. And I knew that I was feeling that way, but I couldn't pull the trigger on that because the kids, I just couldn't do that to the kids. So I guess we're going about on 2 years I'm living alone, and I realized that the drugs aren't working anymore. Like they just weren't working. The alcohol would lead to the drug use, but the alcohol wasn't working either. It's almost as if it was just, I couldn't get high. I was so miserable. So I remembered my roots and I said, I've got to try something different. I found a Bible. I started listening to Christian radio. I started reaching out to God. I stopped using, and it was amazing because at first it was difficult, but I knew that if I hadn't gone in that direction, that I was going to take my life somehow. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was definitely going to. I couldn't take it anymore. The despair was too much for me at the time. So, with that said, I started to really feel a connection with God, and I don't know how to explain it except that this was going on for about maybe 2 months. I was clean and I was like really feeling like, hey, the pastors and what they're speaking directly to me. And it was unmistakable, and it was really penetrating to my soul and my spirit. And I felt like I was ready to make a breakthrough, and I was ready to pull out of this madness that I had put myself in all those years. And this is when it happened, ironically enough. And thank you for your audience for being patient with the backstory, but it's very important you know this because I want to show you how cunning the enemy really, really can work. So my first encounter was October 6, 2013. I was at the office, and I worked a lot, and I was working on a Sunday, and I dropped a friend off in Newport Beach. She didn't have a ride, so I was helping her out, get back and forth. She lived over where I was renting my room out. And I ended up, I'm on like the third floor of an office building, and I could see I'm looking towards Newport Beach where I need to pick her up at. And it was, I don't know, she got off at 8 o'clock, and I think I was in the office around 5 or 6. And I saw this light over Hoag Hospital, and I just kept looking over there, and I was like, this light is incredible. I mean, it was not a star. It was way too low to be a star. It kept getting brighter, and then it would kind of suck in, and then it would get brighter and it would suck in. Kept working and trying to ignore it, but I couldn't ignore it. Left work around 6:30, got over there about 7, and maybe 7:30 to where she was working, and I parked there waiting her to get off at 8 o'clock, and this light was very close to me now. It was just staring right at it. And I remember the security officer, this lady ran security in front of this boat company, and I said, hey, you can see people walking down to the bars in off by Lido Island, and these bars and some college kids down there. And I mean, this thing is weird, man. It's getting super bright, and then it would get super low, and then I looked at it, and I'm watching this thing, and it actually got so it sucked into itself, and it would just disappear. And I'm like, this is really amazing. And then within seconds, it would appear over to the right. It would continue to do this just back and forth. And so I'm getting excited. I'm like, hey, tell this security officer. She's like, oh my gosh, she's watching it. So she goes, I'm going to go home. I got a camera. I'm going to go home. She left. I end up going down, and I'm watching people in this parking lot come in and out. And I'm wondering to myself, and I'm watching these kids walk up and down the strip to go to these bars. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I the only one standing here looking at this thing? It feels like I'm totally isolated. Like, this is really weird. Like, everybody else is like having some kind of weird Twilight Zone movie. So I went down and purposefully found a group of like 4 or 5 guys. And I go, hey, what's up, guys? What's going on? I go, where you guys headed? And they're like, boom, 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 whatever. And I go, hey, if you guys check that out, that light. And when I would do that, they would stop and they'd go, whoa, that's really weird. And then they kept going. I remember one guy saying, yeah, I have a friend that lives on 32nd Street, and we on a second floor. We've seen that for the last couple of weeks or something like that. So I thought, okay, I'm not going crazy. 8 o'clock rolls around. They let my friend out of the boat company, and she comes out. This thing's gone. It disappears right when she comes out, as if it was planned. And I'm sitting here, and we're talking, and I'm telling her, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is my experience. I'm watching this light, blah blah blah. I'm going on and on and on. And she's like, okay, well, can we go? Because I don't see it. And I'm trying to get agitated. I was really agitated at the time, and we kind of were fighting about it because I was so excited, wanting her to see what I had experienced, but it wasn't going to happen. So she would drive, this girl would drive my truck every once in a while. And so she's in the process of getting a car and what have you. So she decided to drive my truck back up Newport Boulevard, I guess, to take the freeway back to the Westminster area. So we ended up getting in the truck, and I just figured, okay, well, it's really weird. And we pull off and we start heading, I guess it would be east or north, away from the beach, up Newport Boulevard. And within, I would say, 5 minutes, she says, "Oh my God!" And she pointed to across me, and I looked up and I see a spaceship. So that's all I can tell you. And it was massive. It was square, long, 3 lights on the front on each side. Massive. I freaked out. I told her, pull over. We actually went over kind of a center divider or a curb, went up into a parking lot, and it happened to be an empty parking lot. She parked the car. I jump out of the car. I look up. This thing's coming at us. It's dark. It's after 8 o'clock now. And this thing is probably the size of, I mean, I would say like a strip mall. I mean, you would think it would be that big. It was almost like I was in a Star Wars movie or Star Trek movie, like literally the Millennium Falcon, if it were like square and like rectangular, the size of something like that coming towards us, and zero sound whatsoever at all. It was bizarre. I'll never forget that there was no sound in the way that it moved. It moved as if it was in water. That's the only way I can describe it. And it was the weirdest thing. And it came and it slowed down. It came right over our head, and I'm screaming at the thing, and she's freaking out. And I remember, as it's going over our head, I remember saying, "What the hell are you? What do you want? Where do you come from?" or something like that. And as soon as I did that, as it was passing us, it actually stopped, and it came back over my head, which scared the the daylights out of us. And we jumped in my truck again, and she was driving, and as we go to leave, I see 3 more of these ships in the distance coming towards our area. And it was, at that point, it was just, I don't know how to explain. You're in such hysteria. It's hard to explain the feeling that you have. So we're freaking out, nevertheless. And we end up backtracking down Newport Boulevard to PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, going north. And I figured we'll take that because we got to get out quick. And we were scared, and I wanted to go up to Warner, which is about, I guess, 8, 9, 10 miles, and then cut over to Westminster where she lived. As we're freaking out, we get to PCH. We're driving up, and the light I had originally seen earlier in the day. Now it's dark, and I see these lights everywhere, 20 or 30 of them, as far as I can see. Because as we're going north on PCH, I can see the ocean, I can see the oil rigs, and on my right, I can see inland. And over every building, as far as the eye could see, it was a clear night, where these lights that I had seen before, they were huge, and they would just move very languidly across the sky. And most of them would stop over big structures. So if there was a building, it would hover. They were hovering over a structure. We're in hysterics. And then to make matters worse, that's when the discs came. So I'm thinking to myself at the time, we're under attack for sure. So this is I guess an alien invasion or something like that. It was just absolutely insanity at the time. And then to add to it, right over my head, outside my passenger window, these discs, I think there were 3 or 4 of them, low, super low, spinning. They were metallic, and they would spin one way, and they had a light inside. Inside of the light was another circle of lights that spun the opposite way. I remember them being blue, and 3 or 4 of them came and just quiet, no sound, nothing had sound. It would just fly. They flew right over my right shoulder, and I'm just going, this is insane. I have the wherewithal to pick up. I can see where my uncle lives, about, I don't know how many miles, 10, 15 miles this way. I can see where I'm running my room out. I have the wherewithal to grab my cell phone on the floorboard, actually call my roommate, my uncle, I think, or my aunt. Got them both on the phone, told them to come outside, and I'm in hysterics. They're like, "Jason, we're out here. We can't see anything. We don't see anything." At that point, I just threw the phone back down. never thought of filming, never thought of taking a picture. That would have been the last thing that would have ever, I would remember being questioned about that after this experience. And I'm going to tell people out there, you don't think about taking a picture or taking a video. I don't even know how I made the phone call, to be quite honest with you. So nevertheless, we're going and we keep going, and these things are flying that way. The lights are hovering over to my right, and to make things worse, the poor girl was driving my truck. She was 18 or 19 at the time. I just remember her saying some really hardcore profanities out of her mouth I'd never heard her say before. And she grabbed me. She goes, "Look." I look over to the left, and we're still driving, obviously. And above one of the oil rigs are these cylinders, and they're massive. They're massive, massive cylinders. There were 1, 2, 3. They kind of were set up like the Black Flag logo, and they were brilliant. And they had this fluorescent light just shining like some 80s weird under like a black light color, really bright orange, neon orange. And that was where things got to a point where it was just like we were kind of getting like, this is the end. This is definitely the end. So we end up, as we're talking about this and we're witnessing this and we're together, I really don't remember what more we discussed together, but we ended up getting up to the light at Westminster, or at Warner, and we made the right. And I needed people to see what I was seeing. I was upset. I was like, this is insane, because the people that were around us in cars, or the people that were at the gas stations you could see walking to get gas, nobody was seeing anything. It was like, this is insane. Like, are we the only people that are seeing this? This is ridiculous. So I had her pull over at a gas station. There was a mother and daughter, and they were standing out by their car pumping gas. And I had her pull over. I jumped out, and I'm a sales guy, so I gathered myself. I didn't want to freak them out. And I walked up kind of by them as if I was going into the AM/PM place to get something. And I just said, "Hey, excuse me, ladies. I guess, have you seen any of these lights?" At this time, the discs and those big ships, obviously, they were gone. Those discs flew over me, and I never saw them again. But the only thing that was left were these huge, huge, huge sun lights. That's all I can describe them as. And they would look up, and they would go, "Oh, whoa," and they'd see them in the distance. So then I get back in the car. Okay, we're not crazy. We're not insane. This is really happening. You just have to wake people up to see what you're experiencing. So we ended up getting to right over by her house. There was an In-N-Out and another gas station. She gets out of her car. I think she was going to pump gas, but as we pull up to this gas station, I see this guy, and he's standing at the gas station, and he's just like this. He's just looking up in the sky, and I go, "Oh my gosh, the first guy who's watching this, I don't have to tell." I jump out of the car. She does her thing. I run up to the guy. I walk up to the guy, and he doesn't even look at me. He just stands there, and I'm standing next to him, and I'm looking at these lights, these brilliant sunlights moving across the sky everywhere. And he didn't even look. He didn't even turn to look at me. I looked at him. I go, "What is going on?" I go, "I just picked my friend up from Newport Beach, and we have seen spaceships the whole way here. And he just goes, "They're here all the time." And he goes, "And they don't come here the way you think they get here." And I think he said something about they go through a portal or a dimension or something like that. I forgot. I don't remember exactly what he said. And at this time, I looked to my right, and just across this little street by the gas station was an In-N-Out hamburger joint, and there were cars in line. There was a cop car in line. And I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to have a conversation with the police, because they need to know what's going on. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to let everybody know what's going on." So I end up doing the same thing. He's in line in this In-N-Out drive-through, and he's got his passenger window down. He's got some cars in front of him, and I don't think he had a car behind him. I think he's at the end of the line. And I went up to him very calmly, and I said, "Excuse me, officer, can I have a word with you really quick?" He kind of went like that, and I went over and I said, "Hey, listen, I got to talk to you for a minute. First of all, I want to tell you I'm not on drugs. I work at a bank. I'm a banker. I'm coming home from work. I'm picking up a friend. We're coming from Newport Beach. And I just got to let you know that there's some kind of ships all over the sky, and I need to know what's going on." And he said, "Come a little closer." And I go, "Have you heard of anything?" And he says, "I may have gotten a couple calls, but That's exactly how he said it and what he said. And I said, what do you mean? Maybe we've got a couple calls. And as I'm talking to the guy, above him and in the distance is one of these sunlight balls coming this way. And we're talking, and I said, listen, I said, officer, I'm going to back up a little bit. Would you mind just looking to your left and up in the sky real quick? And he looked at me, he goes, no, come here. My friend came over behind me waiting for me, and the cop said, come here. He goes, I want you and your friend, I don't want you saying another word to anybody. I want you to get in your car, and I want you to leave. And I'll never forget looking at the officer and the feelings that went through my mind and went through my heart, my spirit. And I thought, everybody's in on this. Like, everybody is in on this. And this guy's not looking, and he's telling me to get out of here. I started to get a little angry. And I think I said something to him again, like, what'd you just say? And he called me over again. And he said, I'm not going to ask you again. I want you to take your friend and get out of here. Or because I don't want to have to send somebody out here to get you. And I'll tell you, man, Alex, I was like, I don't know, man, weird stuff going on. I'll tell you right now, there's weird things going on. So go back to her house, and I ended up going to work the next day. I almost called the Newport police in the morning, and I called my roommate, and she said, don't do that. She goes, I need to talk to you about some things. Come to find out, the lady who had rented the room to me for the last 2 years was from Iowa or Ohio, and she had all these experiences and surprised me that night. We ended up talking for hours, and she showed me articles about her and her family and her disappearing little kid showing up, her sister showing up somewhere else, and she had all this information about what had happened to me and all these theories. But I'll never forget the morning I'd gotten to work about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I opened up the office a lot, and I remember crying and freaking out and just being really out of sorts that Monday morning. And when I got to the office, I sat down for a little bit by the entrance to the office building behind me, and then there was a receiving dock area where the FedEx guys would come and deliver things, and then there was a parking structure where people would come out and go into the offices in the building I worked in. And I remember sitting there, and I remember thinking, reality doesn't even exist. Everything I've ever been taught doesn't exist, including God. The feeling, the things that go through your mind, it's incredible, because you really feel like everything you've ever known and ever experienced is worthless, and that we are absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, and every religion and everything that you've ever even considered being reality is nothing once you've experienced something like that. And I remember bawling, and I remember looking up, I remember cursing God and saying, how could you let this happen to me when I was ready to have a breakthrough with you? And that's when things just got so much worse. Things really got bad after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is absolutely incredible, to say the least, everything that you just described. And just want to take a step back real quick.
Yep.
To remind people that, because I'm sure there are some people that immediately would think, well, do the drugs and alcohol play a role here? And for what I remember, first of all, you were no longer on any substances at this point, right?
I wasn't. I hadn't been for a while.
So you have that, and then you also have the another factor here, which is that there is if I can say the word, corroboration. There are other people that had also seen what you were seeing, and even if it wasn't everybody, there were enough people. I think at least 3 or 4 other people that you encountered that were seeing the exact same lights and craft that you were seeing. So something was going on here. And I think I didn't know about that encounter that you had with that police officer. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you make of that now, looking back on that conversation with him?
Alex, I don't know. Everybody wants to know. Everybody asks that question. It's a great question. I was it was good and bad, because it freaked me out, but it also gave validity to the experience. Like, All he had to, I mean, he didn't, all I do is turn your head. I backed up 15 feet from your car. I was completely as calm as I could be. These things were everywhere at the time I spoke to him. And for you to tell me to get out of here so you don't send somebody out here to take us away, it tells me that there's things happening. And I know it sounds crazy to people, but there things are happening, especially now. I think I'm going on my anniversary, be October 6th, be 8 years from this experience. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. The amount of manifestations, the amount of UFO sightings that I've seen incrementally increase over the last 8 years has been absolutely mind-boggling. I'm sure people out there that have had experiences and have watched this and tracked this and ran algorithms to these sightings and how I mean, the daytime sightings, the nighttime sightings, it's incredible. Not only that, but just all kinds of experiences. I'm sure you've had people on your show, and you will have people on your show. They're going to tell some things that are incredible, and you see this manifesting over time. And I think right now it's just, I feel like it's peaking, and I feel like something's getting ready to happen. I don't know what that means, but I don't know. I think it was a bummer. It was a bummer. I was angry at the cop, but I was also, it gave validity to what was happening. And then I just starts to make you think, how many people know that this stuff's going on? How many people? I mean, it's got to be, if it's police officers, then it's got to be the federal government. If it's federal government, then it's got to be, what do city workers know? Do people that are on these military? I mean, you start thinking about this stuff, and you could go down a million rabbit holes. Exactly what happened after all this, what I ended up doing, because once something happens to you like this, at least the way that I was created, is now I've got to figure it out. I've got to figure out why this happened, what part I play on it, why it happened to me, and that's exactly what I did. And unfortunately, it led me down 3 years of absolute hell. So.
And before we get into that too, I wanted to say that it really makes me think about just this, talking about spiritual topics in general. It seems like a lot of these things that we talk about as it relates to UFOs, aliens, angels, demons, God, a lot of this stuff is hiding in plain sight. People are having interactions with this stuff every day, but it's as if we completely ignore it. It's like there's a veil there that people are uncomfortable to look past. And I can't help but I think part of it is that these topics are very uncomfortable because they reach down into our very soul, our very being, and ways that we comprehend the world, and people don't want to take the time to examine that because that can be very painful. So I think that's part of it. But I also just think that the other part of it for me is just how crazy is it that all of this stuff is going on around us, and yet we act as if all of this isn't going on and is paranormal or fringe topics or the esoteric, when in reality this is just as normal as going to the grocery store. This stuff needs to be presented and brought out into the front, into the spotlight. And I just think it's so sad that we ignore it, because it could be a painful thing to talk about, and it could fracture the way that we have previously interpreted the world. And that's my theory when it comes to that police officer. I can't help but think that he had some encounters himself. He had people tell him about these things, and it was just too much for him. He wanted to put it on the back burner in his mind, so to speak, and just go about with his day. That's too much to comprehend. But I didn't realize just the scope until really I've spoken to you right now of how many people were having this exact these phenomena, this encounter with this phenomena, the UFO phenomena, in the exact same location at the exact same time. I was thinking it was more over here, over there, just different times and different parts of the world. But how many people are having this exact same experience at once is absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I agree. And I'll get into a little bit more of what I think this all is, actually what I know it is all to be. We'll get into that in a minute, but let's just put it this way. It can happen to anybody at any time. Yeah. Do I think that there's cosmic geography involved? I do as well. I believe that there are areas and there are things that are happening in certain areas on this planet that offer that allow more of these things to happen. Absolutely, but I do believe that it's spiritual in nature, and I think that it there's doors that can be open, and that those doors can be open anywhere you are if you allow them to be. So, yeah.
Did you have an interest in any of this before you had these sightings, UFOs,
Oh,
aliens?
so growing up, my whole life, not only was I a huge I love space. I had I had affinity with space my whole life. I don't even really told anybody. I mean, my first tattoo, Rick Spellman, ended up tattooing a big space scene on my arm, and I never
Yeah.
even knew why I did it. Like it's just ridiculous when you look back at how this all happened. So yeah, I did. I thought I had an affinity for space. I had a big interest in space. I love sci-fi, science fiction stuff. That was my go-to for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So interesting, because maybe that could play a role in how these beings were playing on your interest.
Absolutely, I think so.
Yeah, they definitely, as you're saying, we'll get into the specifics later, but they're definitely watching us. They definitely understand our characteristics,
Mm-hmm.
our weaknesses, and
Yep.
definitely try to exploit that.
Yep.
Okay, so you getting back to your story then. So you were at work the next day, can feel like kind of like what I was describing. Your world completely shattered. Everything that you knew was not what you thought it was, and really sounds like maybe the darkest moment of your life. What happens next?
Yeah, you could say that. So I go into this weird feeling like I've got to figure this out. The job doesn't matter anymore. It allowed me to look past my feelings for my children, I guess, really. It allowed me to take that next step. I think the step was going to be, I'm going to find out what happened to me. I'm going to go I feel like I needed to get away. I feel like I needed to go somewhere alone. I feel like I needed to go into nature. I feel like I needed to go to the mountains. I feel like I needed to get away. I feel like I needed to die, but I feel like I needed to figure out what this was and what my part was in it before I died. And at this point, it made suicide seem okay because I wasn't going to do it traditionally. I was going to get my commission check in a week. I was going to grab my guitar and a backpack and get my truck, my Ford Explorer, and I was going to drive north, and I was going to, in my mind, find these things or find these whatever had happened, and I'm going to figure it out. And if I do, great. If I don't, I'm going to continue searching. I'm going to search. And when I run out, I'm not going to get a job. Job's a job. I'm not going to do this. Nothing except getting away from everybody and figuring this out. It's the only thing I had in my mind. So I had my commission check coming. I had my little gear ready to go. And I think I told my best friend at the time, I'm leaving. And my family during this 2 years stint kind of given up. He's gone off the deep end. He's lost everything. And he's in, I don't know what my family thought, but I was completely isolated. Really, there was nobody except my friend who was a complete raging alcoholic, and he was so messed up in his own way he couldn't offer me any help. So I was actually taking care of the guy. It was like one of those leaving Las Vegas types things. It was really sad. He was so addicted to the alcohol. And anyhow, I was ready. I'm going to do this thing. So I ended up taking this guy to a bar in the middle of the afternoon. And there's this girl sitting in the middle of the bar. The bar's empty. I've been in this bar several times in the past, and she's sitting there. Looks like she's like drawing or something. And I end up I sit down next to her. And I just was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And we just talked a little bit, and we got some snacks from the gas station. And she bought Dave and I a drink, and I ended up having a really good conversation for the first time in years. Like this was a good conversation. Nothing more, but a conversation with somebody who I could talk to, and it was really interesting how that happened. So we left that day. We exchanged numbers, and she got through a divorce, and I told her I'd been through a divorce, and I'm not looking for anything. I just want somebody to talk to. And that's what we did. We ended up talking for a couple of weeks, for hours and hours and hours. Never saw each other, just talked. And look back and I know God put her in my life for a reason, because if I hadn't have met her at that exact time, then I really probably would not be here right now for sure. So we ended up talking, and we had so much in common. It was insanity. It was just one of those things where it was nothing sexual. There was nothing more than just an understanding of our childhood and our upbringing. And it was just divine. Really was awesome. And she was renting a room out as well in Fullerton. So, we didn't like this. We didn't like where we were at. We wanted to be together. So we started staying together at hotels and wherever we could, just to spend time together. And I think it was the second time we had stayed together. And I really, really appreciated this girl, and she meant a lot to me. And it was really on a level I'd never experienced before. So I felt like it was my responsibility to let her know what had happened, because if she's going to find out anyway, and if it's irresponsible, I've let a lot of people down in my life, and I didn't want to let her down. So I remember giving her this testimony in a hotel room a few months after I'd met her. And I said, listen, I just want you to listen to me for about an hour. And if you want to leave. And if you don't, but I've got to let you know. So I went through it, and when I was done, she said, I completely believe every word you said. And it was, she accepted what I had told her, unfortunately and fortunately. So long story short, we end up moving in. We get an apartment together 4 or 5 months after seeing each other. We both needed a place to go, and we thought that this was going to be the best step. We ended up moving into a 1-bedroom apartment in Fullerton, California. Well, what she didn't know was that I had this, whatever had happened to me, I had this overwhelming sensation to figure things out. What I didn't tell her was I was seeing these ships a lot. I was seeing different things. I was having experiences a lot after the main experience. I did tell her after some time that these lights would follow me. I told her we had actually a couple experiences together, a couple sightings together. A couple times things were frightening. Nothing like the main encounter that I had previously, but these things were definitely supernatural, and they were mini sightings, I guess you could call them. So, in Fullerton, I became obsessive. I ended up sitting out on the patio at night and filming on my phone and taking pictures for hours. And this went on for months and months and months. I didn't have a job. I couldn't, for the life of me, I couldn't get a job for the first time in my life. I always was able to get a job. And every person I talked to, every company I reached out to, things were really happening that were strange. I would run into people, and I would have conversations with people, and they would disappear. Emails would be scrubbed off my computer. Something was not allowing me to find work, which gave me more time to get on the computer and search for aliens, UFOs, abductions, the blue avians, Nibiru, the Planet X, blah, 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 blah. I was going down every rabbit hole you could absolutely imagine somebody going down to figure out what the hell had happened to me. And it was taking me down so many different paths that I was becoming obsessive, and it was causing problems with the relationship. And the more that I gave time in doing it, the more that things started to progress. In other words, I would be researching and seeing things, and they would happen. I would remember taking pictures on my cell phone of ships and video of these ships, and just sitting down at night and showing her and obsessing over these things. And it went on and on. And then after a few months, I was able to figure out that if I was filming a ship and I looked down, I could see what looked to be entities of some kind on the ground. And I started taking pictures of those, and I started recording those. And we would sit back at night, and I would be obsessed with her. I'd try to show her, and she would see these things. It seemed like she was fearful, and she didn't want to really get into it too much, like I was. So this went on, and it manifested into me experiencing orbs for the first time. One night she was asleep on the couch, and I went outside, and I was crying. I was missing my children. I was really going through. I was filled with despair. The only thing I can, isolation, despair. Was getting these emotions back again. It was really difficult for me to be apart from my kids. I remember crying, and I remember saying out like, "What are you? What were you? What can you help me?" And I remember just immediately orbs right in front of my face within arm's distance, just floating, and me going, "Oh my gosh, it's you guys. It's the things that were in the spaceships." And I mean, it was just ridiculous. And this manifested into seeing more and more and more. And it was always through the phone. I wasn't seeing really anything with my eyes, but it was almost as if the phone's technology was a conduit to let me see these things. And the more that, as the months went by, the more I used the phone, the more I was seeing and the more I was experiencing. The orbs started in real time, and then they manifested a few other times in the house, in the bedroom. Things were getting really dark. People were coming into our lives at weird places, at restaurants, and walking right up to us and talking to us about the occult and the secret space program, and about reptilians and about shape-shifting. We had 2 or 3 encounters with strangers that walked right up to me in a restaurant or in a bar or something to start talking to me about things as if we were on the same page. And it was the most bizarre thing. At the time, I could only tell people that we were experiencing high strangeness to come back later and find out that that's a term in the UFO abduction realm. So one night we came home from somewhere, and I had noticed a pretty big ship in the sky, bigger than I had seen previously. And I didn't want to say anything to her because things were pretty rocky. And she got back in. We got inside the house. She ended up falling asleep. And I said, I'm going to go out and film this thing. And I went out, got up on this little bedrock area that paralleled the apartment complex out in this carport where everybody parked. And I filmed this thing. And I was starting to see ships come, little dots come in and out of it. And I was watching it, and it was almost as if I wanted something to happen. It's really sick to say that, but it's like I just wanted something I wanted answers. And the more I watched this ship that was very far away, but I could clearly see that things were coming in and out of it. These things were coming in and out, were getting closer and closer as they were coming in and out. And over a course of time, they came all the way where I was, and these red balls were little tiny red balls had come from a distance where the ship was all the way over the carport. And I knew I felt fear like I'd never felt fear in my entire life. I remember jumping off this little bedrock, and that was it. I was out there about 9:30, and it was 3. And I was the next thing I remember, I'm in my truck in my Ford, and I remember my girlfriend at the time banging on the window, going, "Get out of there! What are you doing? What are you doing? It's 3:30 in the morning. It's 3:30 in the morning." And I'm completely discombobulated. I don't know what she's talking about. She opens up the door. I fall out of the truck. She grabs me. I could barely walk. She takes me into the apartment, and I end up falling asleep. I wake up in the morning, and I go to stand up out of the bed, and I fall on my feet. My feet had felt like somebody had just, like misery, had just bashed my feet in with something. I felt like I had been beat up I'd been beat up a few times in some fights, and I felt like I got kicked in by like 7 or 8 guys. I had bruises all over my body. I got to the bathroom. I started thinking about the night before, and I thought, well, the thing that I jumped off was only like 2.5 feet, 3 feet maybe. So I'm like, all this stuff couldn't have happened to you by jumping off that, and you don't even remember what happened for that 5-6 hour time space. So like we all do, I'm sitting on the toilet with my underwear, and I've got my phone next to me, and I start to look down at my hand, and I'm looking at my leg, and I see these marks on my hand. I've got these, like, look like my hands had people taking like skin out of my little like layers of skin on my hand. I had bruises all over me. On my left leg, I had these 3 dots in a perfect triangle, one by my kneecap and 2 others up by my higher towards my pelvic, perfect triangle. And I am just absolutely out of my mind. I end up looking up alien abduction symptoms or whatever. I look at the pictures, and all these pictures I'm seeing, I have the exact same things all over my body. I have things all over my body. It's the exact same stuff. I totally go into this complete panic, and I'm just going to speed things up because it gets kind of emotional. This is where things just get really bad because I'm starting to realize that whatever is happening in these experiences now, something's touching me, something's doing something to me, and once you start feeling like that, things go to a whole nother level.
Right. And real quick, before you do that, I wanted to see, because speaking to Joseph Jordan previously, he had mentioned that people that are having the experiences that you're having don't typically seek out any like psychiatric help, because that is the last thing that they want, in terms of they think that that's going to make them feel even more crazy. And was that the case for you as well?
Yeah, until that's very true. Mm-hmm. But as the weeks, maybe a couple of weeks went by, I had to have answers. Like this was like I couldn't. I was starting to lose my mind. I was going crazy. So I ended up finding some world-renowned hypnotherapist in LA called Yvonne Smith, who had worked on with this famous doctor taking out alien implants, and she charged like $350 an hour to do this regression thing. And I'm like, I don't care what happens. I end up getting a hold of this lady. She meets us in Newport Beach, my girlfriend and I at the time, ironically, within a mile where this whole thing had started. And we meet in this little boutique area, and she brings this guy in. She films me. She sits down and records her. I tell her my whole story. I tell her what happens to me. She records everything. I pay her the money. And she says, everything you've experienced is... She's as if she knew everything, and these are all telltale signs of alien abduction, blah, 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 blah. So we go home, and she ends up reaching back out to me, and she says, listen, I can do hypnotherapy if you want to figure out what happened that night and what's been going on with you. And she sent me a bunch of paperwork, and she's like, I want you to take your time, because this could be the biggest decision you'll ever make in your life. If you do this could uncover some things that are going to affect you professionally, affect you're with your family. I mean, this is like this, and it could trigger you. So you have to be 100% sure you want to do something like this. Well, I was kind of a hothead my whole life, had a lot of anger issues. So my girlfriend and I decided, no, we weren't going to do that. And then I'll just kind of cut to the chase and really get to the end of it. Things proceeded to get a lot worse after that. The depression, the sightings. I started seeing and having experiences, otherworldly, spiritual experiences that people would think I was insane. I was seeing reptilian figures. I was seeing all kinds of entities. I'd seen them so much that I could see that they were just like we have. We're all human, but there's Caucasians, there's Chinese, there's Asian, there's Indian, there's African American. It started to become where I could not only take pictures of them or see them in video, but I was starting to get accustomed to knowing what these things looked like. I hadn't had an experience in real time yet, until the night that I was. It's probably a week before the end. I was playing bass in my living room, and we had a pool that separated my window. If I looked outside my living room window, there was the pool, and then directly across was an apartment that had a patio, and then they would face us. We're looking at each other. I remember I was playing my bass that night, and I had the blinds open and the slider open, and I looked up and I saw 4 entities with my eyes, no phone, nothing, and they were dancing, literally dancing to the music that I was playing. And the only way I can describe them is they were between 2 to 3 feet tall, and they had these they were horrible looking, but they had these like tentacles that would hang down like off their faces, and they were a little bit different and a little bit different size. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I finally was seeing something with my real eyes. It was ridiculous. It scared the living shit out of me, excuse me, but it scared me so much. I couldn't even stop playing. I was watching it, and the feeling and the thought was going through my mind. I put down the bass. I obviously ran towards. I didn't look again. I shut the blinds. I shut the door. My girlfriend came home with groceries. I got her inside, and that's when things. In accompanying that experience, we were having supernatural events and things happening in the home that were so over the top that the only way to describe it is that I was being targeted. And if people out there don't know what that is, look it up. It was like an MK Ultra experience. I felt like I was being monitored. I felt like I was some test patient, and that they were doing somebody was doing something to me. I was completely full of paranoia at that time. A few days later, my wife needed to go to spend some time with her sister in Arizona, and I was going to be left alone. And that's the night when things changed. I was sitting in the living room, and she was going to be gone for 2 days, and it was about, I think, 11:30 or 12, maybe close to midnight. I had the blind shut, was watching television. I had a light on. The kitchen was to my left. TV was in front of me. And to my right was the sliding glass door. All of a sudden, I looked to my right, and within 6 feet of me, through the blinds, I see eyes. The size of those eyes that I had seen the previous time when I saw those entities. For some reason, I knew in my mind that they were coming in. I didn't know how they were going to get in, but they were here to talk to me, or like communicate with me. I knew for sure. And I literally went into fight or flight mode. How you got in our apartment, there's no way I could have gotten out the front door without passing them. So I was kind of locked in, and I started screaming. I didn't know what else to do. We knew the neighbor that lived next door to us, Rudy, and he knew some of the things that were happening, and I'm really loud. I could be really, really loud. I started screaming, and I'm screaming, and I'm screaming, and I'm screaming. And I knew that this was the end. My heart was pounding so fast. I knew I was going to have a heart attack. I was sure of it in my mind. It's like, you're going to die, because once these things either manifest through the glass or however this happens, whatever's going to happen, you can't handle it. You were not created to handle this type of experience. So I was going to have a heart attack, and I was screaming. I was crying. It was the worst terror I'd ever experienced in my entire life. I've been in some really sketchy experiences before. I mean, this was over the top, and it was just, you're going to die right now. At the moment I just felt like I was going to take my last breath, I looked up, I cried out. I remember going, Jesus. I go, Jesus, please, God, Jesus. Just as loud. For no one to have heard me screaming and crying that night would be impossible. So I was in some type of a Oz factor. I was in some type of a bubble. I truly believe I was in those bubbles many times, but there's no way no one would have heard me. Nevertheless, I look to my left for some reason, and I see a figure of Jesus Christ, the way that people would think of him, in a robe with a brown belt around his thing, and he's not standing 6 feet, but he's like floating. He's probably, it looked like a hologram. And I see his profile, and he's looking, and these two entities, which looked like Bitmojis, were crouched down below him, like fearful of him. They could barely look at him. And I'm looking at this scene, and I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, this is I'm just like, this is too much. It's just too much. So I look down, and I go, okay, this isn't happening. I remember going like this with my eyes, and I looked back, and he was still there. As I saw him the second time, his profile and his figure, I looked to my right. The eyes were gone from the things were gone from the window. They were standing right there looking in, and I dropped to my knees, and I remember crying, and every single fear I had ever had, everything I'd ever felt from 2013 through May of 2016 was gone. My fear was gone. My anger was gone. My all the emotions that accompanied these weird experiences was gone. And I felt a complete peace about me. I don't know what happened, but I remember started just praying. I just prayed. I don't know how long I prayed for. I just was praying to Jesus Christ, to God. I was like, I just saw Jesus. This is over the top. This is over the top. So that night or the next day, she came home, and I had come across, I was typing like Jesus saves people, or Jesus in the name of Jesus, or alien abductions Jesus or something. And I was on YouTube. I remember it was on YouTube, and I come across this video, and this guy, Joe Jordan's testimony or something from Roswell, New Mexico. I was from the like 90s or something. And I watched this guy, and he's talking about his experience, his testimony. It's kind of a lot like mine. And he's talking about all these people he works with, and then all these people have these like same experiences I had. And then he gets to the end of the testimony. He's like, I'm not only going to tell you about these people, but they're going to tell you. And then they all ended up having all these crazy experiences. And he starts bringing them up one after the other, just like all these people lining up. And they're like, we had these encounters, and we were able to stop them by crying out just in the name of Jesus Christ. It was so ridiculous. It was so awesome. I mean, I was like, this is incredible. And as crazy as all that sounds, and as wild as that is, Joe Jordan, who's the president of CE4 Research Group, he and I ended up, years went by, and I wanted to get a hold of him. And well, I mean, with that said, I ended up going back to the church that my grandparents paid for me to go to as a child. Immediately, I started by myself. My girlfriend, I didn't want to pressure her. Just started showing up to church as much as I could. I'd sit there and I'd listen. I'd have my Bible and I'd pray and thank Jesus. Thank Jesus. And things changed. Things changed. I told her about the encounter. She came home, and she ended up, we went to CE4 Research Group, which was, he had announced was his research group in regards to how alien abductions could be overcome by the power and authority of Jesus Christ, and some steps that you can do to help you get through it. So my girlfriend went to his website, and she printed out the 8 R's to freedom, which anybody watching can go there and find these 8 R's of freedom. And she put these things all over our apartment, in the bathroom, in the living room, in the kitchen, everywhere. So every time I got up, I would read them: what to do, what not to do, what to do, what not to do. My life changed. Years went by. I always wanted to thank Joe, because God put him in my life, and I want to thank him, but I couldn't get a hold of him. I never could get a hold of him. So I ended up getting a hold of him. He was in South Korea. I saw him on an interview, and somehow they left his email, and I'm like, well, I'll try again. So I gave him a quick little synopsis, boom, boom, who I am, whatever. And when was this? This was April 2020, last year. And I emailed him, and he called me. I got this number from Florida, which I knew he had lived in Florida, but I didn't answer the phone because I thought it was could be a prank, a scam call or something. But he left a message: "This is Joseph Jordan. Give me a call back." I call him back. We ended up talking for 3 hours, and at the end of the conversation, he said, "I'm working for a military contractor in South Korea. I don't know if I'm going to be coming back to the States, and I need a representative for the ministry in the States. And I'm also compiling a book together, and I want you to be a part of it." And I'm like, "Whoa, listen, I just called to tell you thanks." So I'm like, "You need to pray about this." And he's like, "It's already done." That's the story. That's the story, guys. Our book came out. Let's see. Our book came out April of last year, Piercing the Cosmic Veil. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night. It has countless testimonies of experiences like mine. It has information from professionals, from MUFON and different organizations. I won't get into the specifics of it, but I'll tell you, one of the things is that if I had this tool early on, I want to tell people out there that there is hope, because if I had the tools early on, something like this resource, it would have made a huge impact and could have got me through things a lot quicker. So I just encourage people to look into it and find it if they can. But to make that long story longer, it's been years now, 5 years, almost 6 years, my life has changed. I am married to the girl I was with under a covenant under the covenant of Jesus Christ, and we were married because that was the right thing to do, because that's what he asked us to do. And I serve in ministry at a local church. I'm on the worship team. I play guitar. I am here to help people, to minister to people, to disciple people, to listen to people, because sometimes that's just what people need. Everything's changed in my life. I never knew how much alcohol, drug use, anger, unforgiveness, isolation, despair, and bitterness, those roots that I had, those emotions that attacked me as a young child that I carried through my whole life, eventually opened up doors to a spiritual realm. And I truly believe that every experience I had was demonic. And I believe that the only solution is Jesus Christ. I don't think that religion's a solution. I don't think that a preacher's a solution. I don't think that works-based or following a law, I don't think anything is a solution except getting to know who Jesus Christ is. Because if you find him, he's waiting for you, and he can solve every problem that you've ever had, and he can show you how to live a life of freedom and to have hope. And it has nothing to do with anything except a personal relationship with him, just talking to him and asking him who you are and what you're here for, because he created us all with a purpose. And it's just been the best. It's been the best. Ironically enough, the Lord, praise God that he had given me that I had brought him into my life. I think that if I had not have asked him into my heart as a young child, because I really did believe it when I asked him in, I believe that the Holy Spirit lived inside me. And I think that if I hadn't have had the Holy Spirit in me during these events throughout the years, I would definitely be either possessed or I would have died or done something horrible. And it just goes to show that he waited for me. He didn't try to convince me of anything. He didn't try to force me to do anything. He just waited for me to come to him in a real way when I truly hit rock bottom. And he allowed those experiences to happen to me because I truly believe that those experiences needed to happen to me to get to a point where I was open to reach out to him and ask him to come into my life. And that's my story.
Wow. Wow. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure a lot of it is difficult to talk about, a lot of really painful experiences. So I really appreciate you sharing it with us, and for highlighting that the truth behind this, that this really is all spiritually based, and coming back to everything that you were, the doors that were opening, so to speak, throughout your life, whether that was through the anger, the unforgiveness, alcohol, any of these different things can act as doorways. And I've also heard too, just experiencing trauma like you had experienced as a child there, that can even play a role as well. All of these different things can act as doorways for these encounters to come into your life. And I know that there's 3 specific things that Joe Jordan and C4 Research Group have found that also act as catalysts, and what has happened to you falls into one of those, which is just being I guess raised in an environment where there wasn't much of a spiritual foundation. Especially, I know Joe Jordan talks about like the father being the head of the household, and if that is not taken care of from a spiritual point of view, the father being spiritually based in the teachings and truth of Jesus, that can open up doorways. Another one is asking for the experience, and the other is just having a background in New Age and occultic modalities. Any of these things can act as a doorway, and I know he even said that even just having an interest in this phenomena itself can act as a doorway. So it is. I didn't realize that, just how many different ways that there were for these experiences to happen for people. I thought that they were much more rare than what they are, and I thought that they had to be much more particular in how they came about. So I say that to hopefully give comfort to people that if you are experiencing, what Jason has talked about today, and you're like, well, what did I do to deserve this? Well, there are so many different openings that can be created. I think many of them very subtle, and to understand that what you're dealing with is not of what many people in this field make it out to be a nut and bolts craft and beings from a different planet. This really is a spiritual phenomena going on here, and there is a solution. There is help, and I'm just so thankful that Jason has shared his testimony and used what the enemy meant for harm for good, and being able to highlight this truth and hopefully bring comfort to people that have experienced what you've experienced. And yeah, absolutely get the book. We'll talk about that here in just a second. I have one more question for you, which is, are you still seeing the sightings today?
No. In 6 years, I think ever since that first encounter, I've had this weird ability to see things that are there that people would probably have to and otherwise look for. So like if I'm at the beach surfing or something, I can look all the way around and see a sea lion or an animal where I just don't even think. I look and it's there. Or if this happened a lot after the experience where when I was seeing things, I would look up and there they were. It's not like I ever have to search. It's a weird instinctual thing. That has happened to me, I think, once or twice in the last 6 years where I've seen something that isn't right, that shouldn't be there in the sky. But what I've done when it's happened those 2 times is I've looked away immediately. One time I was with my wife, and we just one of the things that we're called to do is to look away and not give any attention and credence to those things. So yes and no. Any of the other experiences, everything's been wiped away. I think even in the 2 things that I have seen, or that I've been able to witness, when I think about it, during that time I was under an immense amount of pressure, or I was under some unrest, or something had just previously happened that was very heavy and fearful or chaotic when those few things had happened. But again, one of the things that we tell people is that you can't give any credence to the enemy. You can't give any you don't want to give attention to it or him or them, because that's what they're seeking. I want to before you finish up here, I wanted to let people know that when I got back into the Word of God and found out that the Bible is our real history book, and that we were as kids told literally a lot of lies, and then it really is not only the Word of God, but it's our history book as humans, and that everything in it is true and proven, and every prophecy that's been in it has been proven, and it's actually unfolding right now. But one of the things that struck me when I first came back to Christ after all those years, and this happened to me, that really stuck with me, was Ephesians 6. I'm sure people have all heard it. Maybe you haven't. But it says the whole armor of God, and it says, finally be strong in the Lord and in his strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. It's pretty heavy when you read something out of the Holy Bible after what happens to you. Then it says, therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, putting on the breastplate of righteousness, the shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace, and in all circumstances taking up the shield of faith, which can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me to open my mouth boldly, to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. You guys, I don't want to, I've done these testimonies many times. I don't want to do them anymore, but I have to do them, because if there's anybody out there that hears that I can help, then that's my job. My job, and a purpose he has for me in my life, is to communicate with you people out there and let you know that I'm here for you, that Joe's here for you, and that Alex is here for you, and that there are resources to help you. And the days are dark, and they're going to continue to get darker. And so if I can push forward and continue to do these testimonies and continue to offer my ear to people, then that's what I'm here to do. And then the last thing I want to say is that if you're at a point where you want to understand who Jesus is, the Bible can be very intimidating. I don't have they're behind me, but it's very intimidating at the beginning. But what I encourage many people to do is grab a Bible and go to the Gospels, and that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I just say read those Gospels over and over again, and nothing else, nothing more, and just pray and just talk to God like you'd be talking to a friend, to give you guidance, to have Him give you wisdom, to give you understanding, to remove fear, to help you be a better father, a husband, a wife, an employee, or anything like that. And if you really do that and you seek Him with your whole heart, you will find that things happen to you that dwarf any of the experiences that I had, and that will bring nothing but hope, honesty, truth, righteousness, love, and ultimately salvation, because this life is nothing but a vapor in the wind, and it goes quick. And when this life is over, we're different than everybody else. We were created in God's image, and we're going somewhere, and your life is eternal. So I don't want anybody to not understand that and leave this earth without understanding where they're going and how to get there. And that's all I got for you. That's it.
Beautifully said, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share all of that, your story, and all the truth as it relates to the Word of God. Absolutely powerful, and I'm sure many people, I know myself included, are very appreciative of everything that you are doing and have done to shine the light of truth on this topic. So I want to commend you for that, and want to bring everyone back to where they can find the book, Piercing the Cosmic Veil, written by Jason and Joe Jordan. You can find it at Amazon.com. Also, piercingthecosmicveil.com. And I wanted to highlight as well the website, I believe, is alienresistance.org. I believe this is tied to C4 Research Group. Is that right, Jason?
That's right. I'll take you there.
You can find many different testimonies there of people that have had similar experiences. Also, you can get in contact with Joe Jordan, president of E4 Research Group there. Great resources for anybody that is going through these types of experiences. Also, I just think a lot of hope can be found through that, a lot of truth, and hopefully comfort. And Jason has also been kind enough to share his email as well. So if you would like to reach out to him, it's just going to be jasondezember237@gmail.com. I will leave that in the description of the video and of the podcast as well for people that are needing his help and looking to reach out to him. And again, Jason, I thank you so much for your time and everything that you're doing. And God bless you, and may He continue to guide and direct your steps as you help more people.
Thanks for having me. And to all your listeners out there, God bless you guys. Jesus does love you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is it for the show this week, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for all you do, as always, to support the podcast. I really appreciate that. Whether that's sharing the podcast with somebody, rating the podcast on your podcast app, subscribing to the YouTube channel if that's where you're tuning in, whatever it is, liking the video, whatever it is that you do to support the podcast and help share truth and hopefully hope and comfort to other people out there. That means a lot to me. And just a reminder too, if this is your first time tuning in, we have 38 other episodes that you can go back and take a look at. Hopefully you found this interview to be entertaining, informative, and edifying. And if that's the case, I'm sure that you can find at least one other interview in those 38 other episodes that will suit your interests. I will keep it short this week, everybody. Thank you again for all you do. I will be praying for you. Have a fantastic week. I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.